Welcome back, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Well, we have the Battle of Arausio, 105 BC. This is thought as worse than Cannae. Kind of looked it up. Apparently, it is the worst loss in ancient Roman history. Two consuls or two proconsul armies. Very difference there. Get the names proconsuls, but basically they're fighting tribes that are migrating. I mean, we see this throughout the first century BC, as well as this is the top of or the bottom of the second century. Yeah, we see that all the time. Like, you see that all the time where you'll have like tribes migrating and there's a conflict because of that. We see that with the Gallic War here. So yeah, sit back, relax, and let's see what we got. Battle of Arausio. If I'm not saying that right, polish me in the comments.
It's the dying years of the 2nd century BC, and Roman consul Gaius Papirius Carbo marches to confront a new northern threat to the Roman Republic. Their Tauristi allies having requested aid, Carbo is confident he has the barbarians at ease and totally at his mercy. As he nears the city of Noricum, he spies out the best location from which to launch his ambush against the Cimbri and Teutones tribes. Yet as thoughts of establishing a temporary camp cross his mind, messages begin to hurriedly pass down the column. The ground shakes with the beating of great war drums, and the war cries of his foes echo in the cold breeze.
That does not look good. That does not look good.
As thousands of Cimbri and Teutones warriors begin their charges. Carbo and his centurions.
I mean, this is very similar to like the Earthian War, where they just got ambushed out in the middle of the desert, right? It's very similar. Different people.
Frantically bark orders for their men to form up. Alas, the barbarian warriors swiftly smash into the surprised legionaries.
Jeez.
Carbo's hopes of betraying this foreign folk and proudly entering Rome in a triumph melt away into the pit of his stomach as the screams of his men begin to shatter the air. The Cimbrian War had now truly begun.
They didn't even have to throw trees on them this time. Oh, perfect. Boop. 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 Dang, it's a long game.
In and join the fun. The Cimbrian War that began in 113 BC.
Whoa, we're all the way in Denmark. Love the storytelling. Go subscribe to History if you haven't already. Just do it.
Was sparked by Roman paranoia of migrating folk. A few years before the onset of hostilities, the Cimbri, a Germanic folk inhabiting the area roughly corresponding to the Jutland Peninsula, left their lands. Unfortunately, little is known about them. Even their Germanic identity is being disputed, with a possible Celtic origin. Strabo doubts that the flooding theory of displacement truly occurred. However, whatever
that area floods a lot, and so far, I mean, it goes. The flooding up there is crazy. That's why you see what they do in the Netherlands, like how they utilize flooding technology. I would imagine it's very similar in Denmark.
Exact origins or reasons, the Cimbri, likely numbering in the hundreds of thousands, marched menacingly south. En route to their fated first encounter with the Roman army, the Cimbri, along with their allies the Teutones, were confronted by the Boii people in the Hercynian forest, now modern-day southern Germany.
Of course, the Boii will play a factor with the Caesarian Wars of Gaul.
Unwilling to cede their lands, the horde was beaten back and forced on. It was then that the Germanic alliance was similarly denied settlement by the Scordisci, a Balkan tribe.
I mean, no one's in that area. Well, there's a lot of people. prominent.
Orienting west, the clash with Rome swiftly became an inevitability. Yet it was not angry legionaries that the Germanic warriors initially faced, but their allies. The Taurisci folk inhabited the lands of Noricum, too close for comfort for both the native inhabitants and, as it transpired, for Rome. Unlike their hostile hosts beforehand, the Taurisci were unable to eject their unwanted guests, and so send word to Rome for aid. As allies and friends of the Roman people, the Senate were all too willing to oblige. One of the year's consuls, Gaius Papirius Carbo, raised an army of around 30,000 men and marched north, taking up a position in a pass.
A lot of Romans.
Carbo, as with any hot-headed and eager Roman leader of his day, must have had hopes for battle and glory vying in his mind.
Yeah, he's thinking, I'm going to have a triumph, I'm going to be paraded, etc., etc.
Such an opportunity to confront and crush an impressive enemy right on Rome's doorstep could immortalize him, as well as gain him and his men vast riches, and perhaps even the most coveted of honors, the triumph. How disappointment must have flooded over Carbo then, on receiving the barbarian ambassadors. Far from a proud and belligerent folk willing to play their part, the Cimbri and Teutones' attitude was apologetic. Perhaps cognizant of Rome's military reputation, they pledged to have no ill intentions, assuring the consul that they would vacate allied lands immediately.
Wow.
Perhaps through gritted teeth, Carbo agreed, and supplied guides to assist the unwanted guests out of Noricum.
I would be so scared to be a guide of like some foreign tribal people, knowing that you're hated deep down.
Yet behind the smiles and nods of understanding, Carbo had no intention of allowing the barbaric host to exit allied lands
Oh. Doesn't that make him barbaric?
unbloodied. Ordering the guides to lead them by a specific path, the consul intended to march ahead and ambush the invaders further east.
This is where we started the video. Dang! Dang!
The traitorous move, however, was to prove his army's undoing, as the Cimbri scouts tracked Roman movements. Being alerted to Carbo's betrayal, the Cimbri turned the tables on the Romans. Falling mercilessly on the Romans near Norea, the sight of the larger, blue-eyed and raging northern warriors must have struck terror into the hearts of many a Roman that day. Crashing into the Roman column of march, Carbo's legionaries had no hope of effectively resisting, and the initial slaughter took merely minutes. Of the original 30,000 fighting men, a mere 6,000 escaped destruction.
So 24,000 were captured.
This given the fortuitous intervention of a great thunderstorm and the proximity of nearby woods that permitted their retreat. Perhaps among the scattered parties huddled within their cover, Gaius Papirius Carbo too had survived. His dreams of glory and triumph as shattered as his army, he shamefully returned to Rome, where the people...
That's insane. Well, I mean, if you look at it, it's karma, right? You got Carbo trying to deliver a blow to people that gave them their word that they would leave. And it's hard to enact fault on the tribes because they necessarily did a preemptive attack.
People branded the consul's defeat as a just reward from the gods for his duplicitous actions. Following Norea, terrifying tales of the wrath of their foes, as well as darker whispered
Who's Brennus?
stories of the post-battle practices of the barbarian priestesses, must have frozen Roman hearts as the victorious northerners moved on. Perhaps to the great relief of those same Romans awaiting the storm, it never came. Like that great terror of the Second Punic War, the Cimbri and Teutones did not press their advantage, moving westwards rather than south. It would be Gaul who would suffer in the immediate years. Rome was instead granted a precious reprieve. In 109 BC, the
6 years later, right? Either 4 or 6. I can't remember what it was.
northern problem once again reared its head. Now the allied barbarian army was in the vicinity of Gallia Transalpina, a full Roman province, which necessarily provoked a firm response. This came in the person and army of consul Marcus Iunius Silanus, who was incidentally serving that year alongside Quintus Caecilius Metellus, the
Oh, it's happening at the same time.
man overseeing the ongoing Jugurthine War to the south.
Ah.
As in Noricum, the barbarian army sent emissaries to humbly request land for payment, and perhaps, to their reckoning, they sweetened the deal further by suggesting that they could fight for Rome in return for a permanent
They're good fighters.
home. Silanus sent these ambassadors on the Senate,
Ah.
who predictably rebuffed the suggestion.
Rome does not like being told what to do.
While such an agreement was quite normal in the future later imperial period, such a deal was anathema to these proud men.
Very prideful.
The result when the two forces came to blows was a grisly repeat of Nerea.
Wait, well, the other one was an ambush. If this was a pitched battle at that capacity of loss, that's embarrassing.
Silanus's army was crushed, while its commander survived to be charged for the disaster.
Charged?
Luckily,
What do you mean charged? I'm sorry I'm pausing a lot, but it's just so interesting. Depending on the decision making of what you do, you just be arbitrarily charged for a loss? And when you say charged, what does that mean?
for Rome, however, the enemy's decision not to ravage Italia itself was also repeated. The Cimbri and Teutones pressed on through Gaul, while the Tigurini raided Gallia Transalpina itself.
Ooh.
This in turn caused a local Roman client tribe to revolt, exacerbating Rome's problems in the region. In 107 BC, the Republic sought to re-establish its dominance across the Alps and sent consul Lucius Cassius Longinus to meet the Tigurini threat. For a change, things seemed to be looking up for the Romans, as Longinus's legions defeated the barbarians near Tolosa, or modern-day Toulouse. Unfortunately for them, the avarice of the victorious commander impeded his ability to finish the job. Though the Tigurini had been broken and driven west in disorder, Longinus was loath to leave the captured baggage wagons and their loot. When the legions finally did zero in on the Tigurini, they had had plenty of time to prepare. Reinforced, the Allied army ambushed Longinus's army somewhere in the Garonne Valley, near modern-day Bordeaux. This time, however, the Roman commander would not escape a soldier's death. To rub salt into the collective wound, the surviving legate, Gaius Papilius Laenus, was surrounded and forced into a humiliating surrender. With 3 straight defeats,
You don't hear about that a lot. Tribes making legates surrender? That's unheard of.
behind them and nothing to shield the homelands themselves from barbarian aggression, Rome longed for a success. In 106 BC, the consul Quintus Servilius Caepo did manage this. Caepo engaged and defeated a recently rebelled Volcae tribe. He seized Tolosa, and if rumors were true, much more besides. In taking the place, Caepio also seized a vast treasure that Orosius wrote amounted to 100,000 pounds of gold and 110,000 pounds of silver.
So what are you going to do with that? You going to take it home?
Though sending the hoard on to Marsilia, the gold conveniently disappeared
Of course it did.
en route, with fingers naturally pointing at Caepio.
Oof.
The theft of the treasure, though, would take a temporary back seat to imminent events. With the northern threat still overshadowing the Republic, in 105 BC, new consul Gaius Marius Maximus was tasked with destroying the tribal alliance once and for all.
All right.
But picking him for the expedition was not conducive to a smooth, united response to the northern threat, especially considering that the Roman Senate had his co-consul Publius Rutilius Rufus at their disposal. Rufus was a proven commander, distinguished in the Battle of Mutul, who had served alongside Jugurtha and Gaius Marius himself, under the command of Scipio Aemilianus in the Numantine War.
That's in Iberia, I believe.
In contrast,
Time. Yeah.
Malleus was a so-called novus homo, a new man, one without a long and distinguished family background.
Right. We saw a few. Was it the Second Punic War? Or was it the Illyrian War? It was the Illyrian War. We saw a couple of those.
Eager to forge his own military reputation, he succeeded in getting elected to lead the consular army against the northern invaders. Proconsul Caepio especially resented Malleus's superior rank, given his own much more prestigious background. The result of this hostility within the Roman leadership was a disunited front against the decidedly united allied tribes.
I mean, look, we look at a parallel, and I mean, the title of the video is worse than Cannae, and in Cannae, you had two consuls or leaders of each army. I'm not sure if they were consuls, but had two segments of the army, and they were very much in a disagreement. One was more hard, like let's go after them, let's be aggressive, and one was let's do the Fabian strategy. Let's let them come to us. Let's let leverage happen. So interesting that the result might be similar, but you have to be united, because that comes down to communication, logistics, and strategy. You have to have a united strategy. Otherwise, you're going to have two echo-chambered units fighting for its own resolve versus like a unified measure, as you see the tribes.
Moving down the east bank of the
Hold on. Though their exact movements are unknown between engagements, the allied tribes did request land from the Senate, which was denied.
Rhone River.
By the way, what do you mean, like, the Senate? You're asking land for the Senate. Like, if it's in Transalpine Gaul, and it's a Roman region, yeah, that makes sense. Because you have Roman allies living in this area. But if it's outside the scope of Roman land, what does Rome have a say?
Barbarian host halted near the Roman settlement of Arausio. Hostilities began poorly for the Romans. Malleus had sent a small force under his legate, Marcus Aurelius Scaurus, to scout the enemy position. However, Scaurus failed to slip away unnoticed himself, and engaging with the Cimbri, his outnumbered men were annihilated.
Jeez, can't even scout!
With the ill-starred Scaurus himself being dragged before Boiorix. Dignified in captivity, Scaurus bluntly refused to cooperate with his foes, Boiorix demanding he aid his forces against his compatriots. Bluntly rejecting the suggestion, Scaurus, after apparently even being
I'd rather be the sacrifice to your oh my god.
Presented with the opportunity to escape, stoically remained, unable to cope with the knowledge that he and not his men had escaped. Soon after, he was executed. Meanwhile, division plagued the Romans. Malleus occupied a position.
They're on two sides of the river. That's different. That's interesting. Unless you're going to use Capios or Capios, it's like a easy path. It seems like you can get behind them.
Position apart from his nominal inferior, and though Malleus sent messages to Caepio to coordinate and combine their forces, Caepio brushed these off, urging Malleus to look to his own affairs.
Wow.
Despite not directly subordinating himself, however, Caepio did move his army to the vicinity, camping at first on the opposite side of the Rhone.
Weird.
What the Cimbri and their allies made of this fractured Roman response can only be guessed at, but it's difficult to imagine anything other than confused delight washing over both Boiorix and his fellow commanders. The tribal coalition already vastly outnumbered the Romans.
Assuming a Germani identity, the tribal army would have been largely armed with spears and daggers. So after their victory, captured Roman weaponry and armor were undoubtedly
perhaps fielding up to 300,000 warriors, in contrast to a maximum of about 80,000 Roman fighting men.
How accurate do you guys think these
Men, with an additional 40,000 or so camp followers and others. In addition, Mallius had committed a fatal error in arraying his forces with their backs against the Rhone, cutting off any means of retreat. Mallius too was not enforcing strict discipline within his camp. Caepio's men had urged their commander to convene with his hated rival, and the conference went about as well as could be expected, with the two men parting on bad terms, and Caepio outright refusing participation in Mallius's plan of attack.
This is crazy. That one, there isn't like a hierarchical control here.
Caepio, however, would not long hang back, and perhaps fearful that Mallius would crush the enemy without him, and thus take all the glory for himself, the proconsul relocated across the river.
And notice, I haven't seen, given they had a horrendous scouting expedition a second ago, there hasn't been really much scouting or skirmishers move forward on the Roman behalf.
And closer to the foe. The final nail in the coffin for the Romans' chances of a coordinated effort came with the tribal emissaries' arrival. As with their previous interactions, Boiorix and his fellow kings desired a settlement, but given their past victories, they now demanded Mallius, as their superior officer on site, grant them free land to occupy and grain to feed them. Mallius, of course, rejected any deal as an un-Roman admission of weakness. The very fact, however, that the enemy had rightly sent their representatives to negotiate with Mallius.
Well, they scouted and they saw he was on this side of the river, and I didn't see a subsequent scouting mission, so they made their plans based off of proximity, not off of, politics. But at the same time, who knows what they
provoked an envious rage in Caepio, with the proconsul declaring he would have ordered the northern envoys executed.
Yeah, let's just piss them off.
Caepio, perhaps refusing to allow a mere novus homo from gaining credit for neutralizing the barbarian threat, moved his forces out to strike first.
Okay.
Rebuffed once again, Boiorix and his fellow kings ordered their army to fall upon the divided Roman soldiers.
But they're like 3x. They're like 3x. Oh my goodness. They're at like a 3x disadvantage combined. That makes it a 6x disadvantage when you're isolated.
Specific details on the battle are absent. However, it was Caepio's army who surely first felt the wrath of the barbarian host. Caepio's men must be imagined then confidently awaiting the wild charges, not an ordered,
wouldn't it make sense to kind of have both armies fight at the same time?
And stoic line of warriors, but a tsunami of frenzied and rage-fueled barbarians, each man on average of greater stature and frame. Their speed must have been shocking, this a noted tactic of the tribesmen, in conjunction with sheer numbers. The Cimbri are known to have used great drums stretched across the sides of their wagons, and thus we can only imagine the confidence of Caepio's men disintegrate as an overwhelming beat shook the ground with the barbarians' charges.
This is just unheard of to see this type of slaughter by a tribe. This ain't even Carthage. Even though Carthage, a lot of tribes along the way. a lot of these men are probably suited well in battle for hand-to-hand combat. But Rome's supposed to be the disciplined, organized units of military force. Sad. It's sad. But each their own. This is kind of what happens when you don't play nice with your freaking coworkers at this point.
Howls of foreign tongues piercing their ears, interspersed with their war cries. The initial waves may have been barely contained, but we do know that Caepio's legionaries were shattered and routed. It's likely then that the proconsul's ranks were compromised or flanked. Either way, the survivors were driven back or fled towards the waiting ranks of Mallius's army.
That's it? That's his army?
Who had deployed out from their camp.
Oh, God.
At this site, Mallius's ill-disciplined men were likely quickly infected by terror themselves, as the enraged Cimbri and their allies were not far behind Caepio's armies, routing fragments. With just the remaining half of the total Roman forces, Mallius's men were easily overwhelmed too. Perhaps adding to this general horror were the additional novel threat of the Cimbric women. Unlike the Romans, these hardy womenfolk accompanied their men and even took up arms and fought themselves at times.
Wow.
It was now that the poor positioning of Rome's armies completed the disaster. As both armies were pushed back, the river barred any easy escape. Facing either the wrath of the enemy or the near-certain death of the river, many chose the latter. Between 60 and 80,000 soldiers were either put to the sword or drowned, though Arausius's claim that just 10 men escaped the calamity is perhaps gross hyperbole. What is known for sure is that this was a defeat on the scale of Cannae.
Was the river that wide or just that violent? I mean, I would try to take all my armor off before I jump in that water, but...
and later Teutoburg. Along with both armies near total destruction.
I mean, just because you escape doesn't mean that you're not going to die of exhaustion or hunger or the elements or other tribes.
The camp followers were also set upon too,
Of course.
ratcheting up the death toll ever further. Among the survivors were both commanders, though Mallius hardly escaped unharmed, given he lost 2 sons that day. The proud Caepio slipped away, as well as one of his contubernales, a certain Quintus Sertorius.
Not sure who that is.
Sertorius, of course, would carve out his own place in Roman history as a firm foe of the Sullan regime.
Oh, okay.
Remarkably, the future general, having been deprived of his steed, and after taking many wounds, dived into the treacherous Rhone. Struggling with shield and armor against a powerful current, Sertorius outlived the day, later taking particular pride in his battle wounds, the most visible of which was a put-out eye.
Kind of like Hannibal.
Back
Hannibal, obviously, was just an infection.
across the river, however, thousands of cornered or dying Romans were not so lucky. Perhaps bizarrely to any Roman witness who yet survived, the tribesmen set about seizing the Roman plunder and dumping it into the river, while even the horses were herded into the water and drowned. Legionaries were strung up, strangled where they lay or stabbed, perhaps in light of their overwhelming victory. To the Cimbri and their allies, this was all a grisly offering to their gods. Maybe most horrific of all, a few particularly unlucky survivors may have been selected for special treatment by the Cimbric priestesses. Garbed in white and traversing the bloodied scene barefoot, these merciless ladies crowned their intended victims before these men were taken to be ritually killed. The luckier ones would have their throats slit, their blood caught in a brass drum, and the priestesses receiving a divine message to relay to their leaders. The unluckier men were disemboweled or dissected, their innards examined for signs to presage military results.
Jeez.
News
Barbaric and
of the disaster spread rapidly to Rome, and a vast wave of mourning began, mixed with near panic. Despite
I mean, it's a different level of panic. It's not like Hannibal's at the gates, but still, this is embarrassing. But I mean, it could have been resolved, like, so many ways.
their general disgust of the practice, the Romans, for the last time in their long history, resorted to human sacrifice themselves, burying alive 2
Oh, they went to the Sibylline books.
Greek and Gallic men and women. Despite the magnitude of their latest loss, however, amazingly, the Allied army did not
They did the exact same thing after Cannae.
press on to Italia, but instead split their forces. The Cimbri moved southwest across the Pyrenees, carving a new path of destruction through the Iberian Peninsula for the next 3 years. The Teutones remained to wander northern and western Gaul, with the horde only uniting once again in 102 BC. Meanwhile, though surviving the disaster, both Mallius and Caepio would be prosecuted for their mismanagement of the battle. Mallius, in addition to losing
Caepio was eventually stripped of his proconsular rank, then his citizenship. For the latter, he was interestingly fined 15,000 talents of gold, some perhaps influenced by his alleged theft of the Tolusa. Alleged.
2 sons, was also effectively broken politically, with Publius Rutilius Rufus in practice serving as sole consul.
Wow.
The seasoned Rufus acted decisively by raising another force to defend Rome. To hasten their training, he further hired gladiatorial trainers to teach the green troops. Though we know now that the northern threat to Rome was non-existent, this was far from certain for the shaken Roman people at the
Yeah, literally, someone said Hannibal 2.0, not Hannibal 2.0. This could have been avoided.
time. Rufus obviously took the threat seriously, as in addition to the aforementioned, he also compelled young men to swear oaths not to leave Italia, while outright barring any man below 25 from embarking by boat from Italia, lest they shirk their duty
That's interesting.
to defend their republic. Though a dark day in the Roman psyche, however, Arausio was the nadir of the conflict. The Jugurthine War was over, and the people turned to Gaius Marius, Rome's victor and veteran military commander, who was now free to turn his full attention to this greater barbarian threat. Download.
Of course, that's where you get the Marius reforms, and you kind of like get a little bit more intelligent when it comes to the military across the waves of Rome. This could have been avoided, obviously, just if people kind of like work together. But even if they worked together, I'm not sure they would have won, because I mean, that's a huge force, a convicted force fighting for their existence against a totalitarian regime of Rome, in their opinion, right? Of course, right? But given what we're seeing here, they split their forces, so I'm not sure what happens after the fact. Like, got part of them in Iberia, part of them in Northwest Gaul. Like, I don't know, is there like a continuation, or is that kind of like, you know, do their own thing? I'm not sure. What happens next is the question. What happens next? Is there a video for what happens next? Let me know. Thank you guys for watching. This was just obvious is from the get-go that this was going to end horrendously, given that we had some pre-skirmishes and ambushes that ended the same way. It seems that, I mean, the further away from Rome you are, the more likely something like this will happen. And the pipeline of troops and the subordination, so many things happened. Battle of Arausio, worst loss in ancient Roman history. Could it be the worst Republic of Rome loss? So, unless you compare the Civil War battles, you have to tally both sides. I'm not sure. Thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Peace out. Bye-bye.